Hello, and welcome to Beautiful Hearts and Minds Health Services Orientation Part 2. Today, we will review policies and procedures. Each new hire is required to complete this form. Where it says employee name, you will put your name and hire date, whatever date that was given to you in your offer letter. We will go through each one of the orientation topics. Each topic will have a signature sheet. Following the review of the policy, you will be required to print out each one of the signature sheets and sign to say that you were given the information and that this policy was reviewed with you. At any time during the video, you may pause it so that you can read the policy, review it, and and write down any questions that you may have about the policy. Once you complete going through all of the policies, you can let me know, and then we can schedule a day and time so that we can answer and discuss any questions that you may have about anything that was discussed during this training. Where it says date completed, be sure to write down the date that you reviewed that policy. Where it says employee signature, be sure to sign your name for that date. So if you review the mission of Beautiful Hearts and Minds, be sure to put today's date where it says date completed, and then you sign where it says employee signature. Again, you will be given each policy. You can have an opportunity to read it. If the video is going too fast, just be sure to pause it so that you can take your time and read the policy. If you have any questions, pause the video, write the questions down, and then we will discuss those things later. Okay, so all of the signature sheets will be given to you via Google Drive. You will be given access to the Google Drive. You can print out all of the sheets. You don't have to print out all of the policies. You just will be printing out all of the sheets associated, all the signature sheets associated with each policy. Again, you sign and date each policy that you reviewed on the date that you reviewed it. Okay, so we have a number of things to review, and we will begin. So the first thing is the mission, vision, and philosophy of Beautiful Hearts and Minds. The mission of Beautiful Hearts and Minds is to assist individuals and families achieve wellness by providing easily accessible mental health treatment that focus on setting individualized goals, identifying effective interventions, and providing the support that would lead to self-sufficiency and a healthy quality of life. The vision of Beautiful Hearts and Minds staff is to eliminate the negative stigma associated with mental health through education, professional support, and accessibility. Beautiful Hearts and Minds believes that through early intervention and knowledge, consumers and their families can improve their lives tremendously. Beautiful Hearts and Minds aims to provide consumer-centered, comprehensive mental health care to individuals and families by highlighting strengths and reducing barriers through goal setting, providing professional support, and educating its consumers to manage symptoms of their illness in order to become healthy citizens of their community. Beautiful Hearts and Minds helps to be able to provide services in Baltimore City and venturing into other areas across Maryland. The philosophy of Beautiful Hearts and Minds Health Services is to provide individualized, consumer-centered support to persons diagnosed with mental illness by highlighting their strengths and using those strengths to help overcome their barriers. Beautiful Hearts and Minds will educate consumers on skills to increase socialization, education, independent living skills, anger management, coping skills, prevention of illness, employment, including job readiness skills, along with a vast amount of other rehabilitation skills. This will assist our consumers with maximizing their abilities to function successfully in their communities. So now that we have reviewed the mission, vision, and philosophy of Beautiful Hearts and Minds, please fill in your name on the blank where it says I. Put your name, have read and understand the Beautiful Hearts and Minds Health Services mission, vision, and philosophy and will abide by its mission and goals. Please print your name, sign, and then date. Again, at any time, if you need to reread any of the policies, you will be given an opportunity. Please just push the pause button, and then you will be able to read that policy and jot down any notes or concerns you may have about it. So the next policy that we will discuss is the consumer grievance policy. This policy, it is the intent of Beautiful Hearts and Mind Health Services to provide services with full respect of all due rights of its service consumers. Each service participant is entitled to file a grievance regarding the denial of services based on eligibility or medical necessity criteria. What is a grievance? A grievance is an issue or concern about some aspect of your care that you wish to resolve. This may include your treatment care, denial of services based on eligibility or medical necessity criteria. This also means if you believe that someone has violated your rights while you are seeking or receiving rehabilitation services. A grievance is a formal written complaint about a possible rights violation. Filing a grievance is a way to make sure that you are heard when you believe that one of your rights has been violated. For example, your worker might give information about you to someone without your written permission. You believe that this is a violation of your right to confidentiality. You can file a grievance. Or your worker has promised to help you fill out forms to get housing but keeps rescheduling appointments. You have spoken with his or her supervisor but nothing happened. You can file a grievance. Okay, so this is the policy and procedures that will be given to the clients in regards to their rights and responsibilities while they are in the program. You can read each section. It outlines the specific steps that must be followed in order to file a grievance. So the first section discusses if the procedures to follow for program grievances. So if a client has issues with the program specifically, what they must do. So basically, if a client has a program grievance, they must first speak to the rehab specialist. If the rehab specialist is unable to resolve the issue, then the issue must be then reported to the program director. The program director will have 3 business days to respond to the grievance, and this response will be in writing. If the client still doesn't feel that they have received the best resolution, then the client then is able to file a grievance or contact the core service agency. The next procedures is if the client was denied services from Beacon Health. Please review the next 2 steps to provide to your clients if they have a grievance with Beacon Health. Beacon Health is the agency that approves services for clients. Most of the time, if clients are denied services, it's because they either do not qualify for the services due to their diagnosis. They might have duplicate services. They may not have the proper insurance. So these are the procedures that a client should follow if they have a grievance with Beacon Health. The next part is if they have a grievance, the grievance review for the Behavioral Health Administration. If the client isn't satisfied with the determination by Beacon Health, the client can then file a grievance with the Behavioral Health Administration. Below you will find all of the contact information for the Behavioral Health Administration. You may provide this information to your client and explain to them how to file that grievance. Okay, so the next one is consumer complaint policy. We encourage all consumers to file a complaint for any reason, including concerns regarding your care or services provided. If you feel you have been discriminated, neglected, exploited, humiliated, or retaliated against, It is imperative that you file a complaint. All complaints will be given due consideration without reprisal or discrimination. You may file either an informal or formal complaint or both. So please take a minute to review what the informal complaint is in the 6-point complaint process. After you review the consumer grievance and consumer complaint policy, please be sure to print, sign, and date to say that you received this policy and that you understand the policy. Again, if you have any questions or concerns about anything that was written or any policy that was reviewed, please be sure to jot those questions down and we can review later. The next policy is the Consumer Rights and Responsibility. It is a policy of Beautiful Hearts and Minds to ensure that all consumers we serve have clear understanding of their rights by communicating these rights and providing written documentation of rights. Consumer rights will be given to each consumer at admission and annually. This policy will also be posted at program site in a place accessible to consumers. All staff will receive and review a copy of the consumer's rights and documentation of staff agreement to abide by the policy and will be kept in their personnel files. So please take a second, please pause the video and review the policies and procedures regarding clients' rights and responsibility. Each client will be given a copy of their rights and responsibility during their intake process. This will be in their intake packet. So when completing their intake, they will receive a copy of this. They will sign off to say that they received a copy of it and that they understand. If for any reason the client has questions about it and you are not able to answer the questions, please be sure to discuss those things, those issues with your rehab specialist or your program director. Okay. Okay, so once you review the consumer rights and responsibilities, again, please print and sign your name and date that you received this policy. The next policy is the confidentiality and privacy policy. It's imperative that we always maintain confidentiality and privacy and that we protect our clients' information. Confidentiality means that Beautiful Hearts and Minds Health Services and its staff has a responsibility to safeguard information obtained from our consumers from unauthorized use and to protect protected health information against unauthorized disclosure. All identifying information about your assessment and treatment is kept confidential except as mandated by law. Consumers must sign a release of information before any information about consumer is given to anyone except as mandated by law. In certain situations, mental health professionals are required by law to reveal information obtained during therapy to other persons or agencies without your consent. So please note the following exceptions to confidentiality. Confidentiality does not apply to cases of suspected abuse, neglect of children or the elderly. It does not apply to cases of potential harm to self or others. It does not apply to cases involving criminal proceedings, except communications by a person voluntarily involved in a substance abuse program. It does not apply in cases involving legal proceedings affected by parent-child relationship as required by health insurance. Okay, so please pause the video, take a minute to review this information. Again, if you have any questions, we can review at a later time. Once you have read the policy and procedure, please print and sign and date to say that you received this policy and that you understand it. The next policy is organizational confidentiality policy. It is a policy of Beautiful Hearts and Minds to ensure the privacy and confidentiality of all consumers who use our services and to protect the security of any records related to the utilization of our services. This protection exists for all consumers. However, there are limits to the protection of confidentiality and privacy. Please take a minute to review the definitions and the policy statement. If you have any questions or concerns about this, please write it down. Once you have reviewed the organizational confidentiality policy, please sign and date the signature page. The next policy is safeguarding and protect the health information. Beautiful Hearts and Mind defines and implements its policy addressing the privacy of health information, believing that confidentiality is essential in developing trust between our agency and its consumers. Beautiful Hearts and Minds uses health information only for the purposes of providing safe and quality care and permitted by law and regulation. All information given to or obtained by Beautiful Hearts and Minds staff will be used only for consumers' rehabilitation and administration of the program. Information may be released for the Consumer's Rehabilitation Program if it is required by federal law or in response to legal investigation and court orders. Information requested about the consumer for any other purpose can only be released by the consumer's written consent. During the intake process, the consumer will be given a release of information to sign. In order for us to talk to anyone regarding their treatment and care, we must have written consent. They must sign a release of information for each person and or agency that they do not mind us talking to about their treatment. So, if there is a client, a lot of times we might have some clients that may be 18 years old, however, they're still living with their parents, but because they are considered an adult, we must have written consent, a release of information to say that we can discuss their treatment with their parent. Even though they still live there with their parent, we still have to have consent. We have to have consent to discuss their treatment with their therapist, with their psychiatrist, if they have a case manager, if they are involved in any other agency or organization that requires us to discuss or disclose any of their health information, we must have written consent. So at any given time, there may be multiple releases of information in a client's file. The releases of information are only valid for a year. So every year we will have to get those forms re-signed to say that we can still disclose information to those agencies. A client is able to, change their mind and say, okay, I no longer want you to talk to my mom about my treatment. That's fine. We just get rid of the release of information. We say that it's no longer valid, and then just be sure to let the person know that we just can't discuss their information anymore. So please take a second to review the policy, read through it, push pause if you have to read through it. Also be careful even when transmitting information, just making sure that this includes like digital and electronic, like emails and text messages, you really shouldn't use a person's name, and their protected information could be their name, their address, their phone number, their date of birth, their Medicaid number, their social, any identifying information about the person is protected. So just be sure that you safeguard all of their information. Please be sure not to have their information out and exposed where other people can review it. Be sure that if you're working in the office or your home or you're out in the community, make sure that you are protecting the client's information. If you see a client out in the community and you're not working, and you with other people, please be sure not to say, "Oh, that's my client," because that itself is disclosing health information. Because if one of your family members know that you work at a mental health facility and you say, "Oh, that's my client," you are letting the person know that that person is receiving mental health treatment, and we must safeguard all of their information. Oops, sorry. Mm, okay, I'm sorry. So please take a minute, pause the video to review the policies and procedures. Um, okay. Once you read the safeguard and protect the health information, please sign and print your name on the sheet. So the next policy is crisis management. It is Beautiful Hearts and Minds Health Services policy to take a proactive approach to crisis planning. It is designed so that all staff understand how to handle a crisis in the office and in the field. Please take a minute to review this policy. If you have a client that please provide each one of your clients with our emergency 24-hour crisis number. The number is provided, is also provided to them in their intake packet. This number comes directly to my cell phone, and they are able to call this number 24 hours a day if they are having a crisis. And please explain to your clients what a crisis actually is. Like if they um, are having like a mental health medical emergency, if they are planning to commit suicide, if they are experiencing severe mental health symptoms, be sure to please provide them with this number. If a client is in immediate danger, this is the policy which you should take. This is the procedure that you should take, as well as the de-escalation techniques that you should implement if your client is having a crisis while they are with you, if you're out in the community or in the office. Anytime a client has a crisis, be sure to document it and talk to your direct supervisor about how it should be documented. Generally, it should be documented as if it was a face-to-face visit. It should be documented as a contact note, as well as completing an incident report that outlines what exactly happened, who was there, and what took place. It should be placed in a client's record. If for some reason a client calls you and it's not face to face, then you will be required to complete a gap note. You will still have to report the incident to your direct supervisor, which is the rehab specialist, and still complete an incident report and tell specifically what you did to resolve the crisis. Each client will also be given a crisis intervention form that they will be required to complete during intake. At this time, that would help them to identify what they would need to do if they are in a crisis, who they need to call, what procedures they need to implement. We will have a copy, and a copy will be given to them. Once you review the crisis manager policy, please sign and date. suicide prevention policy. This policy and procedure is established to ensure that all individuals who receive services through PRP are evaluated initially for risk of self-harm and throughout their treatment. The suicide assessment protocol is in line with the best practice to follow a uniform process to evaluate protective factors of consumers. To understand the protocols necessary to reduce the risk of suicide, thereby implement a safety management process which promotes wellness and recovery. The rehab specialist will conduct intake session and will screen for suicidal ideations by utilizing the Columbia Suicide Severity Rating Scale. Okay, so when we receive a client, the client is initially screened. During the screening, for adults, the screening generally takes place within 10 days of admission. And for minors, it's normally within 5 days. The screening does discuss a client's history and present suicidal ideation. If there are present thoughts of suicide, if there's a plan, then the person conducting the screening will will implement the procedures necessary to reduce the risk of suicide. I.e., that may means call a mobile crisis. That may means taking them directly to the hospital. That may means getting them EP or emergency petition to go to the hospital to prevent the suicide. They will also, each client will be required to complete the Columbia Suicide Severity Rating Scale. It's basically an assessment that rates their history or present suicidal ideations. Each client will be required to complete this assessment. Okay, so suicide will be assessed frequently during a client's treatment. It's initially assessed during the screening. It's also assessed during when completing their assessment. The assessment is completed within 30 days of admission. And each time that you see your client, you really should discuss or identify or know whether or not the client is having any current suicidal ideation, because that is a question that is asked on each note, their mental status exam, whether they have any suicidal or homicidal thoughts or if they have a plan. So please be sure to be aware of your client's thoughts in regards to suicide so that we can implement whatever we need to in order to prevent it. So please take a second to read through the policy. Pause the video at any time so that you can jot down any questions or concerns, and then we will discuss at a later date. After we review the suicide policy and prevention policy, please be sure to sign and date. Okay. So the next thing is the emergency response. Anytime that you are in the building and there may be an emergency that takes place, these are the codes that will be used in order for you to know what is going on. Each one of the codes has a response, and it identifies what your response should be. In any of the office, you will find these codes written on the wall. They're taped to the wall, and there are walkie-talkies in each one of the offices. Also, we have a group text on GroupMe, so you can also join that text message group, as well as when you're in the office, you are required to also have up your email address so that we can also send you a direct message, an instant message, if there is an emergency going on. So we have multiple ways that we can communicate with each other in the event of emergency in the building. So just please be sure to be mindful of what each code is. And if you are unsure, again, these codes are posted in each office. of the building, and there is a walkie-talkie. Use GroupMe text messages. You can use the instant message to let your other staff members know of what emergency is taking place. Oh, sorry. Golly. What is going on? Sorry. Okay. Sorry. So please again review the policies or what you should do for each occurrence. When you come into the building, it is imperative that you sign in each time that you come into the building, especially for emergencies, because we need to know who's in the building. If there's a fire, we have an electronic way. You must sign in on the iPad, the time station, so that we are able to identify who was in the building during any emergency. Once you review the emergency response policy, please sign and date. It's pretty extensive, but again, just anytime doing a video, just pause it so that you can actually read through it. For some of the ones that you have the specific concerns or just want to make sure that you understand it, you can request a copy of these policies and procedures, and I can give you a hard copy of the procedures. All right, so infection control. The purpose is to reduce the risk of infections, and individuals serve care providers and employees through identification, prevention, control, and surveillance. Below you will find definition of some of the infections. Please read through it. Because we deal heavily with the public, be sure that you are maintaining the best safety, health safety as possible, meaning making sure that you wash your hands, making sure that you use the hand sanitizer. If there was any spills or, bodily fluids or anything, be sure that you follow the proper procedures. There are always Clorox wipes around the building that you can wipe off surfaces, doorknobs, or any suspected area that could have been touched by consumers or staff. So be sure to follow those steps. After you review the infection control policy, please be sure to print, sign, and date that you reviewed this policy. Next policy is communicable diseases and infections. This policy is to establish a policy on how staff should handle communicable diseases. Please review and read each policy. You may pause so that you can read through, write down any questions that you may have. Sign and date once you review the policy. Okay, critical incidents. To establish uniform guidelines for prompt reporting of clinical incidents to Program Director, critical incident reports will be used by Beautiful Hearts and Minds for evaluating and improving the quality of rehabilitative services rendered and to mitigate risks for the consumer and for Beautiful Hearts and Minds Health Services. In the event of any critical incident, the physical well-being and safety of the person involved shall be the primary consideration. Referrals to the appropriate life-saving and or safety agency shall be made. All critical incidents are to be reported immediately to the program director. So, identifying, below you will find definitions of what a critical incident could be. Okay, once you read through the critical incident policy, please be sure to sign and date to say that you reviewed the policy. Okay. Next policy is the corporate compliance policy. The purpose of this policy is to enable the Beautiful Hearts and Minds Health Services to demonstrate integrity and honesty regarding the organization's corporate compliance program plan and assign responsibility for the implementation of that plan. The policy, Beautiful Hearts and Minds Health Services, is dedicated to the delivery of behavioral health care in an environment characterized by strict conformance with the highest standards of accountability for administration, clinical, business, marketing, and financial management. Beautiful Hearts and Minds Health Services management authorities are fully committed to the need to prevent and defect fraud, fiscal mismanagement, and misappropriation of funds, and therefore to the development of a formal corporate compliance program to ensure ongoing monitoring and conformance with all legal and regulatory requirements. All staff members, including employees, contractors, interns, advisory board members, are expected to abide by this corporate compliance policy. Please review. Please sign a date to say that you received this policy and that you understand. The next is the standards of conduct. It is the policy of Beautiful Hearts and Minds to use its best efforts to avoid fraud, waste, and abuse, and to adhere to all guidelines and regulations governing federally and state-funded healthcare programs. Policies outlining standards of conduct shall be distributed to all individuals who are affected by specific policy at issue, along with new and amended or revised compliance policies when available. Okay, so the first one is claim development and submission process. So basically, submission of claims for payment to Medicaid will be in accordance with the current reimbursement rate, rules, policies, and procedures by Maryland. So basically, we are only able to submit claims for payment for clients that we service face to face. The client must need the services. They must have medical necessity, and it's only for face-to-face visits. um, Claims will be submitted only when appropriate documentation supports the claim. So basically, each time that we see a client, we must provide that documentation in order to submit a claim. All professional services rendered to the patient shall be documented, and it will be reviewed by our clinical staff. You will be compensated for visits that you complete face to face, and documentation is provided for. Okay, so medical necessity, um, it varies from patient to patient, but basically, we just have to prove that the client medically needs this program. And that means that we have to identify what their symptoms are in regards to mental health and how it is a hindrance in their day-to-day life. So when discussing with clients, like especially if you have clients who are interested in a program, or if you just explain the program to someone, you have to let them know that a client has to have medical necessity in order to be into the program. Okay, so it just anyone can't just be in a program. They have to have the proper diagnosis. They have to be referred by a licensed mental health professional, and they have to have shown certain symptoms over a period of time, which prompts them to be referred to our program. We do not pay for referrals. We will not pay or accept payment from anyone in regards to referrals. Um, we will not provide cash or office space or whatever to referral sources. You also cannot use our organization or any of our property for improper use. So just be sure that, for instance, you soliciting our clients, or just anything that's ethically inappropriate, you are not able to do with our clients. Again, if you have any questions about what specifically that means, you can discuss those things directly with the program director or rehab specialist to get further clarity. Okay, ethical code of conduct. Please review. Once you review the code of ethics, please sign and date to identify that you understand all of the code of ethics for Beautiful Hearts and Minds. So the next policy is the right to a safe and healthy workplace. All Beautiful Hearts and Minds health services personnel have a right to a safe workplace free of dangerous conditions, toxic substances, and other potential safety hazards. Please review the policy, and at the conclusion, be sure to sign and date that you received this policy and that you understand. The next policy is Patient Safety Program. Beautiful Hearts and Minds is committed to improving safety for our patients at all our sites and centers. This performance improvement plan has incorporated the activities and functions necessary to establish and maintain a comprehensive program for patient safety and will be implemented at all levels of the organization. Each employee of the organization performs a dedicated and critical role in ensuring patient and employee safety. Activities of the organization, activities and functions that have been incorporated to address patient safety include communication with patients about patient safety, including patient education and informing patients about their care, staff education, including related orientation and training and expectations for reporting of results to staff, committees, executive leadership, and governance, process for proactive risk reduction and analysis of centennial events. After you finish reading the policy, please sign and date. Okay. So the next policy is field safety guidelines. It is important that you use the best judgment when working with clients in the field. Um, because of the type of work that we do, we are able to see clients in any kind of location, generally any time. So we just want to make sure that you are implementing the best safety guidelines when seeing consumers in the community. So the purpose of this is to establish guidance with respect to providing safety training to employees. It is our policy to ensure all staff are trained and familiar with hazards associated with their job and to reduce the potential for risk at the office and in the community. The guidelines are intended to help you plan and prepare for health and safety problems you might encounter in the field. So some of the things that you should be aware of, if you are going out into certain areas, of course, the bulk of our clients are in Baltimore City. A lot of the areas are not the safest. So if you feel uncomfortable about certain areas, you may want to choose to go to certain areas early in the daytime. Um, you may opt to have the client just to meet you at the office. You might find a public place to meet the client at, like the library, or you can meet them at the store. Um, but just to ensure that you are safe. So if you visit a client's home and you are not feeling safe, you can always excuse yourself, schedule another appointment, call a client, um, and just schedule another day and time. You can establish boundaries moving forward. Like, hey, moving forward, I need you to, meet me at the office, or meet them in. They can come to your car, or whatever situation makes you feel the most comfortable. Try to establish those boundaries with your client. Also, try not to take a lot of things into a client's home with you. Really, if you have any specific papers or documents that you need to give the client, take those in with you. If you have to get a signature sheet signed, take that in with you. Keys, phone, and always try to have an ID on you. We provide you with an ID, so that when you go in the community, that you are easily identified as, a PRP worker, and that you are a resident of the area or that household. So just take any precautions that's necessary, um, to let to prevent any harm. Also, it's a good idea too, if you do have any specific concerns about a certain area, a certain client, always letting your supervisor or some admin staff know what you are doing. So if you're going to an area that you have concerns about, or let your supervisor know, like, hey, I'm going to go see John Doe on Friday at 2 o'clock, so that in the event of emergency, we know where you were supposed to be. You can call us prior to you going there. You can call us after you leave. Whatever makes you feel safe. However, if there is, some issues with the household or anything, you are not obligated to go to their house. Your safety is the biggest concern. So, again, you can provide alternatives to the client, as far as meeting them. Like I said, you can meet them at the library, meet them up the street. You can meet them at McDonald's. You can meet them at the office. You can meet them at the park around the corner. But just be sure that it's an area that you feel the safest, and that you can be productive when implementing your interventions and providing services. Also, if you're in a client's home, um, this just for professional boundaries anyway, um, try not to go on upper or lower levels of the house if you can prevent it. You want to make sure that you have easily access to an exit. Um, so and just as a professional boundary anyway, you should not go into a client's bedroom unless there are extreme circumstances. However, just make sure that someone else is present, but you just do not want to put yourself in any compromising positions because we do visit them in their homes. There are still boundaries that we should follow and professional judgment that we should follow when visiting clients in their homes. So if a client, for privacy reasons, may not want you to discuss their things like in the living room or dining room, the kitchen, you can also use the porch. You can go outside to your car. Y'all can take a walk, but just do not put yourself in compromising positions that could cause a grievance or complaint towards you. Okay, so for animals, if you do have like specific allergies or you are uh, afraid of certain animals, you can ask your client prior to visiting them, do they have any animals, so that you can be aware um, of what the household entails. And if they do have, animals, you can request that they either put the animal up when you come visit, or that you guys meet somewhere in a community or outside, or you can request to be transferred. They can be transferred to another coordinator that can accommodate them, or if you or that's not allergic to the specific animal. So now, please sign and date the say that you received the field safety policy. The next policy is a transportation policy. Beautiful Hearts and Minds Health Services acknowledges that during the course of their work, employees, the contractors working with specific services may, as a part of their role, be required to transport consumers or colleagues in their own vehicle. All staff or interns driving a personal vehicle for any company-related business shall maintain a valid driver's license, insurance, and must operate a vehicle in a safe manner at all times. At all times of hire, the following documentations are required: a valid driver's license, driving record, and car insurance. So, I do suggest that you talk to your car insurance and let them know that there may be times that you have to transport clients due to work. There is an additional service that you can get through your car insurance, but you just want to be sure that you are covered. Sometimes it may be an additional fee, but generally it's a small fee if there is a fee, but just be sure that you always maintain a driver's license, your driving record, or car insurance. If for any time during your employment or during your contract you any of those things expire, please let your supervisor know. There are alternatives. So, for instance, if you're having a car issue, we can try to figure out to see if your clients can come to the office where instead of you going to each person's house, you can just go, you can just have your clients to come to the office. Or we can try to schedule events in the community and we can have another staff member to assist you with that that does have a vehicle. But there are alternatives if any of those things happen to lapse or there's issues regarding your driving record or your car insurance. If for some reason that something happens while you are with your clients in the vehicle, like an accident, for instance, please be sure to report that to your direct supervisor. Certain documentation will have to be reported in order to safeguard and make sure that you are protected. So, be sure to inform the admin staff and complete the necessary documentation. Okay. So payroll, payments, and paychecks. Um, the purpose of this policy is to notify all staff of the services that will be paid and services not reimbursed by Beautiful Hearts and Minds Health Services. The policy also provides timelines for payment. So you will be reimbursed for each authorized face-to-face encounter. And when I say authorized, that means authorized by Beautiful Hearts and Minds admin staff as well as Beacon Health. Okay, so we must have authorization from their insurance in order to provide them with service. You must have authorization from admin staff to service that client. For each visit that you complete, each face-to-face visit, you will be paid. Unauthorized encounters will not be reimbursed. So if you were given instructions to see a client or to not see a client and you still saw the client anyway, you will not be paid for those visits. Okay? If a client is not authorized through Beacon, you will not be paid for those visits. So just be sure that whoever you are seeing, that you have authorization from administrative staff as well as that we have authorization through Beacon. Okay. PRP services for minors must be they must be seen at least at minimum 3 times a month, but it's required that you see them at least 4. Okay, and again, this is for face-to-face visits. Adults must be seen 6 times per month. You will be required to attend staff meeting and supervisions. Staff meeting and supervision will be paid based off of whether you are during your probationary period, and also staff meetings will also be paid monthly if you participate. And this is only for up to 1 hour. Okay, so this says the paychecks will be dispersed on the 15th of each month. However, this is no longer correct. However, you should have been given the rehab coordinator pay schedule. So we do direct deposit, and because we do direct deposit, we have paydays every 2 weeks, and you will be paid on the administrative pay schedule. So most of the time you will be paid maybe on the first or second payroll of the month, which generally occurs between maybe like the 10th and like the 18th. So it's normally around the teens that you will be getting paid, but it's not the same date every month at this time. So again, if you have any questions about what payday is, you should have been given the pay schedule. Your time period, you have to work throughout the whole month, and then you'll be paid the next month. Okay, so we'll go over that at a later time. But you will be paid once monthly. It will be direct deposited into your account. Your pay will be based off of when you submit your documentation. Any delay in receiving documentation, including contact notes, signature sheets, time sheets, or any other document that was requested of you in order to maintain compliance with the client's medical record, or any documentation that is needed for their treatment, could delay your payment. So please be sure just to turn in documentation when it is required. If you have any questions about what those due dates are, talk to your direct supervisor or contact the program director. Please sign a date to say that you received the payment and paycheck policy. The next policy is the consumer signature sheet. Each client, every time you go see your client, you will be required to get a signature saying that you completed that visit on that day. Okay, so when completing the signature sheet, you must put the date, the time, the start time, the end time, the duration. The duration is just how long you were there. So if you was there from 9 o'clock to 10 o'clock, the duration would be 1 hour. You must identify whether the the visit took place on-site or off-site, if it was individual visit, meaning like it was one-on-one, or it was a group visit, and have the client to sign. Okay, this must be filled out each time you see a client. This is for each face-to-face visit. It is imperative that you have this information accurate, because this information will have to be transferred to your timesheet, and this is how you will then be paid. This information must be accurate because it must also match whatever documentation that you submit. Please be sure to check and double check to be sure that your signature sheets and your documentation and your timesheet all match. If there is a minor client, the minor can sign the signature sheet. However, the parent must sign beside um, one of the visits, preferably the last visit, and also sign the top of the signature sheet. Okay, so be sure that your if the minor signs, they can sign, but the parent must also sign as well. Please sign and date to say that you received the signature sheet policy. All right, so the next is consumer intake and assessment policy. Beautiful Hearts and Minds expect all new consumer assignments to be provided prompt services. This policy also outlines the guidelines to follow with a new consumer for the first 3 scheduled visits. And actually, we kind of have now we have the first 6 visits scheduled. So basically, anytime we get a new client, the intake package should always be completed during the initial visit. The reason being is the intake packet provides them with the consent to treatment form. So in order for us to provide them with services, we must have consent from them or the parent to say that we can treat them. So if we do not have consent to treatment, we should not be providing any service to the client. So please be sure that if you are asked to complete the intake, that you complete that part during the initial visit. If you are unable to get through the entire intake packet for whatever reason, please always be sure that you get the consent to treatment signed during the initial visit. Okay, most of the time when you are assigned clients, the assessment and intake should already be completed. The administrative staff try to complete these documents prior to a client being assigned to you. However, there may be some times where you are asked to get the intake packet completed. Again, if that is the case, be sure that the consent to treatment is always signed during the initial first visit. Okay, because the intake packet includes the consumer handbook along with a lot of documents that they must sign off on. The intake process could take 1 to 2 visits depending on the client. So just be sure that you familiarize yourself with the intake packet, you familiarize yourself with the consumer handbook. You can choose to verbatimly read through the handbook with the client, or I suggest that you learn it and kind of be able to familiarize yourself so that you can summarize the policies and procedures to the client. The consumer handbook is to be given to the client, and they have to sign off and say that they've received it. Okay. Within the first 30 days, we try to, by the third session, we try to complete the rehab assessment. The rehab assessment is generally completed by an admin staff. The rehab specialist could be the rehab specialist assistant, program director. You can also you can also complete the rehab assessment given that you have been trained on how to do so. So just inform your client that they may be required to come to the office to complete the rehab assessment, or someone may, depending on availability, may come to their house to complete the rehab assessment with them. The other 3 sessions, we have additional assessments that have to be completed too, that you will be given access to, which is the nutrition assessment, the medical, physical assessment. They have to do a trauma assessment. Like we've talked about before, they have to also complete a suicide assessment. So there are additional assessments that have to be completed, which is why the first 6 visits are imperative, because we try to get all of those assessments and documentation completed, because a lot of them are timed and have to be completed within the first 30 days. Okay, so please sign and date to say that you understand the intake and assessment policy. You will be given additional training on the specific assessments and how to complete them. This also discusses the rehab assessment for minors and adults. The policy for completing these assessments. Again, most of the time the assessments will be completed prior to you being assigned to a client. Administrative staff will generally complete the assessments. However, they may be isolated times that you have to complete assessments. Please review and read through this, and these are some of the areas that will be assessed to identify how we will treat the client. Please sign and date to say that you received the policy regarding minor and adult assessment policy. Continuing evaluation policy. The main purpose of progress notes medical record documentation is to serve as a basis for planning and continuity of consumer care. Progress notes are required as part of the chronological record of care, and is the expectation of Beautiful Hearts and Minds Health Services staff is responsible for maintaining correct, complete, and accurate progress notes. Providers are responsible for following all applicable case record and documentation requirements as specified by Maryland Coma regulations. So basically, each time you see your client, you must complete their contact note within 24 to 48 hours of seeing them. Contact notes are recorded for face-to-face visits, and they must be reflective of the rehabilitative services. These notes must be reflective of their treatment plans and their goals and any interventions identified on their treatment plan. Please review the policy, and again, if you have any questions or concerns regarding any of the information, please document it. You will have a more thorough training on how to complete documentation in another training video. However, this just identifies the policy regarding completing the documentation. You will be required to complete progress notes or contact notes. You will be required to complete progress notes are for each face-to-face visit. A monthly summary must be completed each month to summarize the client's progress on their goals. You must complete a gap note or communication log for any gaps of services. And any additional documentation that may be required, i.e., if you had to complete a incident report or any specific things happen throughout the month, you will be required to document those so that they can be put into the client's medical record. Okay. You will be required also to submit weekly billing forms. The billing form is just a form that lists all of your clients, and it tells us who you were able to see for that week. The billing forms are due every Monday at 12 o'clock. Again, you will be given more detailed information on how to complete the billing forms and how they must be submitted during your documentation training. Please sign a date to say that you were given the continuing evaluation policy. IRP and IRP reviews. So, each participant in the program must have an IRP. this is how we establish or identify how we are going to service our clients. A IRP stands for an individualized rehabilitation plan. So IRPs must be completed within 30 days of admission. So both minors and adults must have an IRP completed within 30 days. The IRP is generally completed based off of the assessment. So any areas that the assessment identifies the client may need assistance with, we should work on those goals with the client. And those goals will be established and developed in the IRP. The IRP also identifies how we're going to assist the client with those goals. So the IRP identifies a long-term goal, a short-term goal, how we as the staff will assist them, what interventions we will implement, how frequently we will implement them, and the target date in which we will stop working on that goal. Okay, so each individual in the program must have an IRP. That is what you use in order to document from. You have to have an IRP in order to document. This is the treatment plan. Okay. For minors, the treatment plans or the IRPs must be completed every 3 months. And for adults, they must be completed every 6 months. Okay, so when your client's IRP is expiring, you must do an IRP review, and you will be given a document so that you can identify how to update. So the IRP review is basically reviewing the IRP and identifying any changes, revisions, eliminations, additions that need to be made to their treatment plan. The IRP review also identifies why those changes or no changes have to be made. And like I said, for each minor, it has to be completed every 3 months, and for each adult, it has to be completed every 6 months. You will be given specific training, again, on how to complete an IRP and IRP review. Initial IRPs will be completed by the rehab specialist or the rehab specialist assistant, but ongoing IRPs will be a team effort. So it will be in a collaboration with the client, their PRP worker, and the rehab specialist or admin staff. So please review and read the policy. And if you have any questions or concerns, please jot them down. Like I said, a more detailed training will occur on how to complete a IRP and IRP review. Concurrent review. So every 6 months, both minors and adults have to be reauthorized. So every 6 months, this is why it's important for you to be sure that you complete your monthly summaries, that you collaborate with the therapist monthly, and that you do your IRP reviews, because this helps to determine whether or not a client should remain in the program. So basically, the client has to continue to need the services. They have to continue to show certain symptoms. They have to continue to have a diagnosis that requires them to maintain services. So please be sure that you review that you write accurate documentation, that you review the IRP, so that we can request an additional referral from their therapist or mental health professional to get an additional referral. So every 6 months, we have to get the client re-referred into the program, and we have to determine why they continue to need those services. Please sign and print to identify that you received the concurrent review policy. Billing submissions, as I said before, each week you are required to turn in a billing form or service ticket. This identifies who you serviced for that week. Generally, the billing forms can be pre-done for you. You will just have to write, just check who you saw, whether you saw a person on site or off site, and for what date. It's a pretty simple form. This will be given to you through the Google Drive. If you have Google Drive on your phone, it's really seamless. Again, you will be given a more detailed explanation of how to complete the billing form in another training. Please sign and date and say that you received the billing submission policy. Okay, so billable and non-billable services. These are some of the areas that clients can be provided services in. Be sure that in order for us to bill for a service, that it was a face-to-face contact. Only face-to-face contacts can be billed for. So make sure that I know a lot of times that we talk to the clients and stuff like that on the phone. And some pertinent information may be given through phone contact or if you guys email or text. But be sure if there is some pertinent information that is given through those communication avenues that you document that information in a gap note. Only billable service are face-to-face visits. Okay. So if you have any questions about that, please be sure to talk to your rehab specialist or the program director about that. Here's some non-billable services. Educational tutoring. We are not educators. Some of us may be educators, but that is not a billable service for PRP. Transporting clients. Be sure that when you are documenting that you aren't saying that was the service that you provided, that you transported the client to therapy. That is not a billable service. Even though we may have to transport our clients to different places, the actual service that we provide is not transportation. So if we transport them to a therapy session, the billable service is that we participated in a therapy session and we were collaborating with the therapist and the client, not that we transported them to the session. Okay, so in order to make it a billable service, you must participate in the collaboration or in the session. Attend the IEP meetings is not a billable service. So be sure that you do not say that you attended the IEP meeting and using that as a contact visit. If you did do that, again, it can still be documented because some parents may need assistance or just need your support during those meetings. But again, that's up to your discretion, but it's not a billable service. Again, phone calls and text message conversations are not billable services. But if pertinent information is given during those phone calls or text messages, please be sure to document it as a gap note. Any contact less than 15 minutes if it's a off-site visit is not a billable service. You must minimally see your client for 15 minutes if it is off-site. Okay. And if it is on-site, you must see the client for at least an hour. Okay, so you can read through this and identify what services are billable and what is not billable. Okay, so if your rehab specialist or the rehab specialist assistant see any of these things that are in your contact notes, then just be aware that these will not be, these services cannot be billed for. Okay, please acknowledge that you have read and understand what services are billable and what are not. Collaboration. Every month, you are required to collaborate with the referring provider. This may be the therapist, the mental health, any mental health professional, social worker, psychiatrist, nurse practitioner, school social worker, whoever sent the referral, you are required to complete a collaboration with them. The collaboration can take place face-to-face if you participate in a therapy session with them. You can email them, you can fax them, you can text them, whatever. Any type of communication with their referring provider, you must document. So, and they must identify how the collaboration took place, what was discussed, who was present, the day and time of the collaboration. Okay, this must be completed monthly. It's imperative, so imperative that we maintain contact with these providers, because when it comes time for us to get the client reauthorized, or we need certain documents complete, a lot of times a licensed person has to complete documentation in regards to maybe Social Security or transportation. We must have an ongoing relationship with them so that we can get those things completed for the clients. So be sure that you contact the clients. Even if they don't respond, we can say we did our due diligence. Hey, I emailed the therapist, John Doe LCSW, on 3/19 in regards to Jane Doe's treatment. I discussed her progress with getting employment through doors. You will also be given more detailed instructions and training on how to complete a collaboration note. It doesn't have to be real extensive, but just identify that we are maintaining contact with the treatment team. Please sign and date to say that you received the policy. And that is the end of all of our policies and procedures. There are some additional trainings that you will have to complete. If you had any questions or concerns about any of the documents, any of the policies, any about the procedures, if you need a copy of any specific policy or procedure that you would like to have for your own particular records, please let me know. All of the signature sheet documents you will be given access to on the Google Drive. It will be under the policies and procedures folder. And these are all of the sheets. So you can print this out. If you don't have access to a printer or you have difficulties printing it out, you can come to the office. We can provide you with a copy. But be sure to complete the front page form that identifies that we went through each policy and procedure. Write the date that you reviewed it or that you heard it. Write your name under the signature. And be sure to sign off that you receive each one of the policies and that each policy was reviewed with you. Okay, so these are just all of the signature sheets. It's not all of the policies. It's just the signature sheets associated with each policy that we reviewed. So again, you can print them yourself and sign off on them, return them to me. I need the original copies, but in the meantime, you can also scan them to me. Or you can come into the office and these can be printed for you. So if you have any questions or concerns about anything that was discussed today, please be sure to jot it down. Shoot me an email at lross@beautifulheartsandminds.org and let me know that you have some questions or concerns. They can be either addressed via email or we can schedule a specific day and time if there are several things that we need to discuss. Okay? All right. Thank you guys so much. And there will be other training videos sent to you on how to complete documentation and other requirements as a new hire. Thank you.